Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight in today with some really thought-provoking sources.
Yeah, a fascinating mix.
We're going to unpack these big ideas about balance, healing, transformation, both for us, like individually, and maybe for humanity overall.
That's right. We've got leadership stuff, articles on that, very personal reflections on family trauma, and then this wide-ranging talk with Dr. Zach Bush, the physician and scientist.
So our mission, really, for this deep dive, cut through it all, pull out the core insights, and see how they connect.
Like a shortcut, yeah. A way to grasp some powerful concepts that feel really relevant for right now.
Finding those underlying patterns, the wisdom that kind of bubbles up when you put these different views together.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack that first big concept, and it seems to weave through a few of these sources, the idea of the bird of humanity.
This is framed as an ancient prophecy, coming from traditions like the Cherokee, the Baha'i faith. It's a metaphor.
A really strong image. Humanity as this bird, but with two wings, masculine and feminine principles.
Right. And the prophecy describes this long period of imbalance. For centuries, it says, the male wing was the dominant one, the one primarily extended.
One source puts it pretty strongly, saying it became overmuscular, overdeveloped.
And in fact, become violent.
Yeah,
While the female wing
was held back. Unfully extended is the phrase used.
somewhat truncated, somewhat shy. That's how it's described.
And here's the crucial part, right? Because of this lopsidedness, this imbalance.
The bird couldn't fly straight. It's been flying in circles, unable to really soar or find the right direction.
Wow. Just think about that image in terms of world history or even current events,
Right.
flying in circles.
It resonates, doesn't it?
Definitely. And what makes this feel so immediate, so relevant now, is how the source is connected to this century, the 21st century.
They call it the Sophia Century.
Okay, the Sophia Century. And the promise is,
The promise, according to these sources, is that this is the time the female wing will fully extend and express itself fully, importantly, in both men and women.
so it's not about one taking over from the other.
No, not at all. It's about finding co-equal partnership,
Yeah.
real balance.
And the idea is, as that female energy comes fully online, the male or yang energy can relax.
Relax, yeah. Settle into a more balanced state, and then the whole world comes into balance. The bird can finally soar.
It's a vision of potential, unlocked through integration.
And one source really stresses this framework gives everyone a chance to blossom without making anyone wrong for how things were in the past. It's about moving forward.
Okay, so that's the big picture, this sweeping collective imbalance and potential rebalancing. How does that actually trickle down? How does it affect us personally?
If humanity's been flying in circles, where does that pattern show up in our own lives? And the sources make a direct link. They really connect that collector story to our personal experiences, especially using insights from that Bad Dad piece and Dr. Bush.
They talk about inherited trauma or generational PTSD.
Exactly. The idea that previous generations went through massive stressors. Dr. Bush mentions those big wars crammed into 70 years.
Okay.
And they often didn't have the tools, the understanding to really process that level of overwhelm. So that unresolved state, that feeling, it can get.
Passed down. So how might that show up for people today?
It could be things you recognize, maybe. A sort of baseline difficulty in just relaxing, being present,
Yeah.
feeling disconnected, maybe from nature or even in relationships.
Like in the Bad Dad source, looking at the parent-child thing, it mentions your dad has PTSD.
And it's crucial. The source says this isn't an excuse for bad behavior, but it's insight into why certain patterns might exist.
It makes you think about that line from the Bad Dad source. People who are chronically overwhelmed become disassociated to life and their effect on it.
That's a heavy thought, isn't it? Being so overwhelmed you can't fully connect to yourself or how you impact others.
Yeah. But then the really critical point in that source is, okay, someone else's trauma might affect you, but you are the one carrying the weight of your relationship to him.
Your healing, your peace. It's in your hands. You don't need to fix them. You heal yourself. That's the focus.
Which connects to Dr. Zach Bush's idea, doesn't it? The sledgehammer effect.
Yeah, that's a fascinating concept. The idea that sometimes collapse, personal rock bottom, depression, maybe even a societal crisis, it isn't just destruction.
It can be a necessary stillness.
A necessary stillness, exactly. He calls it a required moment to begin a birthing process again. Like you need that pause, that stop before something new can come through.
He even talks about his own experience, hitting a point of total stillness, surrender, before creativity could flow again.
Yeah.
So connection feels pretty significant. The collective shift we're in, all the challenges, the feeling of potential collapse.
Yeah.
Maybe it mirrors that personal journey.
Facing the old patterns, hitting a wall, letting the old ways break down.
To create the stillness needed for something new, something
Yeah.
more balanced to emerge. Could that be what's happening on a larger scale?
It's a powerful lens to view it through.
Let's go deeper into that personal piece then, connecting it to Dr. Bush's ideas that bridge science and something more spiritual.
He starts from this fundamental idea: everything is energy.
Okay. And not just abstractly.
No, he suggests our thoughts, our emotions, our actions. They create actual vibrations that ripple outward, tangible effects.
He even mentions experiments showing high-frequency emotions like love, gratitude. They have positive impacts.
Measurable positive impacts, yeah. While lower frequency stress, anger, fear, they literally diminish vitality. It's framed as a real energetic exchange.
And then his view of the human body.
Wow.
He calls it a biology phenomenon, way beyond just simple chemistry.
A miracle, yeah. A black box, almost. Think about it. Millions of species living in us. Quadrillions of mitochondria, bacteria, fungi, all working together somehow.
So the big question is, how does all that complexity coordinate?
He suggests it must rely on some kind of sophisticated wireless communication network. His example is, how does one cell know how to become 70 trillion cells perfectly organized into a baby?
That inherent intelligence.
He calls it the genius of the universe in its totality.
Which links back to that idea of a creative intelligence or source, all it is, that the Bad Dad source also mentions.
Force behind creation, not just making babies, but every time we birth a new idea, a new solution, a new way of being.
What's really striking is his idea that everyone has this creative womb space, regardless of gender.
Yeah, it's not about physical anatomy. It's an innate capacity we all have. And it's accessed, he suggests, through surrender to something greater than our individual will.
So less about forcing things with willpower.
And more about allowing that universal intelligence to flow through us, collaborating with it.
That resonates so much with that radical idea in the Bad Dad source that you already are a complete person.
That's a big one.
Yeah. The idea that you weren't born broken or needing fixing by your childhood. You existed before birth with talents, intuition, fully built.
Fully built, yeah. With everything needed.
So your childhood experiences, even the really hard ones, the trauma,
Yeah.
they weren't meant to create you, but were like the landscape you chose to navigate to become who you already are deep down.
It completely reframes how you look at difficult pasts, doesn't it? It puts the power back in your hands in a way.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we see the collective imbalance. We see the potential for these inherited patterns, but we also recognize this inherent energetic nature, this creative power within us. How do we actually, move towards rebalancing? How do we help the bird soar?
The how-to. The sources offer both mindset shifts and actual practices.
From the Bad Dad source, forgiveness comes up big.
But redefined powerfully. It's not about saying bad behavior was okay.
No, it's defined as releasing ourselves from the obligation of carrying the emotions we have towards someone, including ourselves, crucially.
That reframe is key, because that source argues that carrying those heavy emotions, the resentment, the anger, the sadness towards someone else, that's what keeps you stuck. That's how you unconsciously repeat patterns.
If you're carrying the emotional weight of a distant father,
You might, without realizing it, keep finding yourself drawn to distant partners because that feeling is familiar.
so forgiveness, defined as releasing yourself from carrying that weight, is how you break the cycle.
Exactly. Because reality meets us where we are. You're in charge of your life. Shift your inner state, the source suggests, and your outer reality has to shift too.
And Dr. Bush, his suggestions seem rooted in surrender.
Yeah, practices like intentionally seeking silence, even if it feels like running into the wall, he says, because it forces you to stop the mental chatter.
And feeling more, rather than just thinking your way through everything.
Trusting the body's intelligence, yeah. Rejecting that impulse to constantly micromanage ourselves with complicated biohacking. Surrender to nature's wisdom within us.
Nature comes up a lot, doesn't it, across the sources?
A really strong theme. Dr. Bush, the restoring energetic balance piece. Reconnecting with nature is central.
Like grounding,
Yeah.
just walking barefoot on the earth.
Simple, but potentially powerful. Dr. Bush suggests it connects us to the Earth's electron supply, which he thinks helps neutralize inflammation, those positive charges in the body.
And rewilding.
Rewilding, yeah. Not just letting weeds grow in your garden, though maybe that too, but rewilding yourself. letting your own innate, wild, creative nature come forward from that original seed bank inside you.
The restoring energetic balance source gets quite practical too, with practices for integrating masculine and feminine energies.
Like the creative birth, how to approach projects by collaborating with that inner creative intelligence, not just pushing.
Or the balanced leader, integrating different energies in how you relate to people. Gentle strength, decisive action with listening.
Leading through service, yeah. And for caregivers, there's grounding caregiver, connecting to earth, honoring ancestors, and listening guardian, deep listening.
Even practices suggested for kids, nature detective, finding gratitude, and emotion explorer, learning to name feelings.
And the point isn't just personal benefit, is it? The sources emphasize that when we're in these more balanced, high vibrational states,
It creates fields of coherence.
fields of coherence around us, yeah, that can actually invite others into their own balance. It's like becoming a keystone species in the human ecosystem.
A keystone species, I like that. Your balanced presence helps the whole system thrive.
Exactly. Just like in nature.
So let's bring it back to the big picture again. This vision for the Sophia Century, this era we're in.
The sources really reinforce that this time is about all people. It doesn't matter about gender identity or anything like that. It's about everyone stepping into their full capacity.
Full capacity meaning both strength and tenderness, logic and intuition.
Action and receptivity, yes. Moving beyond those old, rigid boxes.
The vision sounds like communities where caregivers are seen as whole people, valued, where strength includes being vulnerable.
Where leadership is collaborative, inclusive, and where success isn't just profit, but the well-being of all life.
And achieving that requires honoring the masculine principle too,
Right.
but evolving it.
Evolving it into a more complete expression of human potential, yeah. Celebrating leaders who are strong enough to be vulnerable, wise enough to listen, decisive, but from a place of wholeness.
Ultimately, the responsibility for this shift, it's not on one group.
No, the sources are clear. It rests on all of us working together in our diverse and authentic expressions of humanity.
It's about learning to finally
Fly with both wings of our shared humanity, leading with both heart and mind.
and creating from wholeness, not from those old wounds or inherited patterns.
That's the potential.
Wow, we've really covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from ancient prophecies to modern science.
From deep personal trauma to this huge collective potential for transformation.
We've seen how imbalance inside and out holds us back, how inherited patterns can shape us, but crucially,
They don't have to define us. We're presented as inherently complete, energetic, creative beings capable of deep healing.
and we've explored these paths towards rebalancing, connecting with nature, tapping into that inner creative space, that womb space.
Practicing forgiveness as this radical act of self-release, consciously choosing our energetic state.
And how these aren't just self-help things. They're ways we contribute to rebalancing the whole world.
The Sophia Century, it seems, is here, inviting all of us right now to let both wings, masculine, feminine strength, tenderness, logic, intuition, fully extend.
So the bird can finally soar.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe sit with. It comes from reflecting on these sources, especially Dr. Bush's perspective. He described his own really challenging personal journey, the wandering, the pain. He called it perfect because it allowed him to learn to transmute that pain into insight. So if our individual paths, even the really tough parts, can be seen through that lens as a perfect process for our growth, our integration, could the current collective challenges, the turmoil, the feeling of collapse humanity is facing, could that also be understood as its own kind of perfect path?
A necessary process for humanity to remember itself, integrate those long imbalanced parts.
And finally achieve true collective balance. What happens if you look at this turbulent moment we're in through that lens? What does it change about how you choose to navigate it? What possibilities might open up? Something to think about.